Welcome to Minerva Meets. I'm your host, Sonal Chandler, and this is episode 14. Today, we're going to be talking about a topic that's on every business owner's mind, cyber insurance and its role in our digital landscape. And before we dive into this topic, I want to introduce my guest, Gregg Knepper. Gregg is president of Integrated Coverage Group, an independent insurance agency that offers a variety of insurance solutions both to businesses and individuals. Gregg brings a wealth of knowledge to the table, and today we're actually going to unpack how cyber insurance is evolving, why it's critical for businesses, and what you really need to know to stay protected. Welcome to the show, Gregg. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
So, why don't we start off by you can give us a background about yourself and how you got into insurance and really what what Integrated Coverage Group does.
Sure. Yeah. Well, thank you. I've been in the insurance business for I guess over 15 years at this point. I started my career in finance, and I relatively quickly realized that that was not for me. And I always knew that I wanted to be a business owner, and so I said, "What can I do to own my own business and help people?" And I looked at a few different options. I said, "Insurance business sounds pretty good."
Love
And
it.
so I worked at a large national insurance brokerage for a few years. It was a great experience. I learned a lot, and I said, "You know what? I think I can do this better and bigger on my own." And so I did that. And so I left there about 13 years ago, and I started Integrated Coverage Group, and I've never looked back. And so over the past, 13 years or so, we've grown. We have employees in multiple states. We're licensed in about 10 or 12 states, and we work with individuals and businesses on their insurance programs to help them mitigate their risk, reduce their risk, and certainly try and keep their costs, in check with the best options there are in the marketplace for them.
I love it. I love that you are a business owner yourself because I think you can relate to my audience, which is small to mid-sized businesses. And before we started recording, I know we were talking about this question of cyber insurance, and I get a lot of questions about it. And what I'm really looking forward to doing today is just sort of dispelling some of the myths around it and really helping people understand what it is and why they need it. And I guess without further ado, why don't we dive right in? And maybe let's start off by talking a little bit about what cyber insurance is and what its role is in, protecting businesses.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the most important things that I try to convey to my clients is there's a couple of them. One is that all businesses should have cyber insurance, whether you're one person working out of your garage or your basement or office, or you are, a national company with hundreds or thousands of employees in multiple locations. The bad actors do not discriminate. They will attack the smallest of companies, the largest of companies, and everywhere in between. So every business really needs cyber insurance. And the other thing that's really important to understand is that cyber insurance typically is not included in a standard business owner's policy. So for many years and up through today, a lot of business owners that I speak with say, "Oh, I don't need cyber insurance. I have liability." Well, yeah,
Yeah.
that's great, and you should have liability insurance. However, cyber insurance is typically not included in the standard package or business owner's policy. Sometimes insurance carriers will include some level of cyber or data protection coverage, but it is a very watered down version of what businesses should have. Meaning, if a standard policy has $1 million plus of coverage, a business owner's policy might throw in $10,000 or $50,000 or $100,000 of coverage, as well as the terms and conditions are not robust. The whole portion might covering cyber might be 1 or 2 pages, where a standalone cyber policy could be 30, 40, 50, 100 pages. And so it's really important to understand that a standalone cyber policy is really the best way to cover any business, and all businesses should have it.
That's actually a really good point because I think that's where there's a lot of confusion. Because, oftentimes, sometimes even just talking about insurance can be a little bit confusing as a business owner because there's so many different options, and you're typically trying to find, what is the most amount of coverage I can get for the least amount of money, right? And so, how do you, like, can you give an example of what a single policy would cover versus what's included? Like, is there a specific thing that you can point out to?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest differentiator is the limit, meaning, at the higher end, typically that would be included in a business owner's policy, they might include 100,000 or even $500,000 of coverage, where
Mhm.
standalone cyber insurance policy that we would help our clients with starts at a million. We have clients that
Okay.
have a million or 2 million, 3 million, 5 million, 10 million, $20 million of coverage. Whereas if you have 20,000 or 50,000 or 100,000 and you have a real data breach or cyber attack, it's simply not enough coverage. Um,
Yeah.
Additionally, there are, as I referenced, if you have a 100-page cyber policy, certainly there are exclusions in that policy, but a lot of those pages are actually providing the coverage and defining coverage and indicating what's covered and what's not. When you have a 2 or 3 page policy, it might just be saying, okay, if you have a data breach or a cyber attack, we'll pay for notification costs, and they'll pay for whatever is required by law to notify your customers or clients or counterparties that you had a data breach.
Mhm.
Well, it might not pay for credit monitoring, for example, for those people that were affected. Oftentimes, those policies are excluding coverage like coverage for social engineering or cybercrime, and that's one of the biggest types of cyber events that we see these days. And there's outright exclusions for it. It's not covering.
Mhm.
So we not only do want to make sure that there's coverage for that, we are oftentimes even enhancing that coverage through standalone policies where they might give $250,000 for a certain coverage. And we say, well, we want a 500,000, or and there's more flexibility again when we have a standalone cyber insurance policy.
Absolutely. And I think that what's important to note here is that, some of these events that happen can literally take a business out of business. And so it's really important to have that coverage, and it's not just the $50,000 coverage. You want the larger limits to cover not only the costs that it takes to recover, but also to continue keeping your business going. So tell me a little bit about, cyber insurance is becoming increasingly necessary, right? So, are there things that people think that cyber insurance is that it isn't? Are there myths that we should dispel about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think I already touched upon really the biggest myth, and that is that it's not going to happen to me.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
unfortunately, we deal with that as insurance brokers, not just from cyber insurance, but other types of insurance, right? That we help our clients with all
Right.
types of insurance, obviously. So, like employment practices liability, people say, "Oh no, my employees or former employees are never going to sue me. We're a family," and then they get sued, right?
Right. Right.
Similar with cyber insurance. Oh, we're a 5-person company, and we don't really hold that much data. And if something happens, we'll just get our backups. And but the reality is, as I indicated earlier, the people that are actually attacking companies and trying to steal data and hold data hostage, and you know, uh, trying to get you to send them money. They don't care how big your company is. They don't care who you are or where you are or what sort of business you're in, typically, although certain businesses are targeted more than others. They just want money, and it is a crime of opportunity, and they're just trying to get money typically. And so they don't care if you're a 5-person company or 500. They cast a wide net and they will go after you. And if you don't have the money to pay a ransom and you don't have insurance, you can be out of business if you don't have your data.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I can relate to everything you're saying because as a consultant that helps companies really understand what their risk posture is when it comes to cybersecurity, I get a lot of clients that tell me, well, I don't need to do X, and or this is never going to happen to me. And I can't tell you how much I talk about being proactive versus reactive, and I'm sure that you have that same challenge when you're talking to clients about, take that proactive approach and make sure that you're covered and secure versus reacting later because it's just a bigger mess at
Yeah, I
that
mean,
point.
absolutely. That's kind of the cornerstone of insurance, right? I mean,
Right. Yeah.
once something happens, it's too late if you don't have insurance. And there's an insurance carrier, Chubb, which you may have heard of, and pretty big insurance company. And I haven't seen it in a while, but used to have this TV ad, and the tagline was, "It doesn't matter who insures you until it does." And I always say, it doesn't matter if you have cyber insurance until it matters. And then once it matters, if you don't have it or you don't have the right policy or the right limits or the right coverage, well, now it matters. And then it's too late to, try and, go backwards and say, oh, I should have done this or I should have done that.
Absolutely. And then not to mention that you actually have to disclose that you had a previous breach, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So then your, ability to qualify becomes probably
Yeah.
a little bit harder.
There's something interesting there, actually, in that that might even, I would say that's actually one of the myths around cyber insurance is that if you've had a data breach that, you can't get cyber insurance. In fact, if you've had a data breach and it's some time ago, meaning not last month or 2 months ago, but some period of time in which you've been able to mitigate the damage or fallout,
Hmm.
and you have actually said, okay, this is how it happened, this is how we're going to prevent it from happening again, you put the right safeguards in place, it's not necessarily a terrible thing because now the insurance carriers look at it and say, okay, these people have suffered from a cyber event. They know what it feels like. They have warranted that they've done the right things to prevent that type of issue happening again. So they may actually be a better risk than someone who has never seen this before, is kind of like, this isn't going to happen to me and I have insurance and it doesn't matter, right? So,
Yeah.
it just depends on how you react in all types of insurance. Insurance carriers know that claims happen. It's, in other areas, they're not, they're maybe less inclined to insure you if you've had multiple claims or a claim, but it's all about how you've mitigated the risk of it occurring again in the future.
That's actually super interesting because, what I'm hearing you say is if you've sort of had this incident happen before and you've put the right controls in place, it doesn't negate your ability to get insurance.
Yeah.
And so it's important to have those controls in place,
Yeah.
right?
I would point out that any insurance carrier that's going to insure you if you've had a previous cyber event or data breach, they absolutely will exclude any coverage related to that previous claim. Meaning,
Oh,
like,
sure.
you had a claim and they're somehow still in your system and it's something happens and it's related to that initial claim, they're not going to cover that.
Oh, sure.
But if it's a separate incident, separate type of claim, and it would be covered otherwise, that they would cover that type of claim.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about qualifying because I could recall about 5 years ago when I was working for an early stage startup. We were trying to get cyber insurance and it was so easy. Like literally, I just, reached out to somebody and next thing you know, we had a policy. Fast forward to 3 years after that time, and then when I reached out for a renewal, I first got this questionnaire that said, "Hey, you've got to kind of prove that you've got these controls in place,"
Yeah.
and it be sort of becoming a little bit harder. So let's talk a little bit about how do small businesses qualify for cyber insurance?
Yeah, so you bring up a good point there, and that has been my experience as well. Like most things in life, the application and diligence process for getting a cyber insurance policy has been cyclical over the last many years.
Mm,
Meaning, when I first started writing cyber insurance a dozen years ago, it was a long application, and there weren't
hmm
carriers writing it, and they were really digging into it. And then we went into this stage of where you know, it got much easier for a long time, meaning like we could literally write a cyber insurance policy if you could answer three questions affirmatively, right? Do you back up your data at least once a week offsite? Do you have a firewall that's updated regularly? And what was the third one? Haven't done it in a while. There was one other relatively low bar question.
hmm
And then, it sort of went back to the stage of where, we're looking at 5, 7, 10 page applications. And that's
hmm
kind of where we are today. And they just want to know more, carriers want to know more about what is going on. And typically, if you have an outsourced IT company, which, most of our clients do, you're getting assistance with that application because the language and the things they're asking for are, not, not everybody can answer those on their own.
Right.
I always say these longer applications actually are very educational sometimes for clients because we send them a 7-page application to review. They go through with their IT company and they say, well, what's this? What's that? Do I need this? Do I need that? And now it's coming to the point where it says, okay, well, let's use multi-factor authentication, for example. They don't have multi-factor authentication. And it prompts them and says, hey, do you have multi-factor authentication for, for all of your resources that your employees or contractors can access remotely?
Hmm.
I say, oh, well, we do it for email, but we don't do it for OneDrive or whatever the case may be. And now they're actually revisiting it, and it prompts them to shore up their cyber preparedness, um,
Yes.
which is very important. So the application process and how hard and easy it has ebbed and flowed, at this moment, they're asking for more information.
Yes, and I actually appreciate those, the more informations because it does start a dialogue, right, with the business owner and their technical team. Because typically, we're just sort of those people in the dark room that are typing on computers, right? And to start that dialogue about cybersecurity and what are some of the things that you need to have this secure environment, this type of dialogue, it helps start that. And then I think that that's just an important conversation to have, because it doesn't happen enough. And people get busy, right? And people forget about these things that they should probably have in place. And
Absolutely.
unfortunately, it's times like this when they're going to renew or when they're going to qualify for insurance is when the conversations tend to come up. Um, what are some hurdles that you see these small organizations face when they're trying to qualify for cyber insurance?
I think on the most rudimentary level, particularly the smaller businesses, just don't have the proper procedures and code of protocol in place, and even just very simple things, right? Like, we have clients that say, "Oh, well, I use Google Drive for my data." Well,
Mhm.
okay, well, how do people access it? How is it backed up? Um, you know, is it backed up? And people just think, "Well, I use Google, it's fine," but it's not, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So like the most simple things sometimes are not taken care of. The multi-factor authentication is a huge thing. I don't know, probably about 2 years ago now, most carriers said, we're not going to write any insurance for you if you don't have multi-factor authentication.
yeah,
So that was,
yeah.
that was a real transition. So people are just not doing the right things. And so carriers say, well, sorry, we're not going to write a policy for you. Um,
Right.
and I always caution folks because I think you referenced this earlier in podcasts, and that is that people will just kind of check a box and say, "Yes, we do that. Yes, we do," and they
Yeah,
don't. And then
yeah,
you have some sort of cyber event or data breach, and like most insurance carriers and claims, carriers don't just write a check. They do a deep dive. They want to understand what happened, what occurred, how to stop it from happening again. And if it turns out you said, "Yeah, we did A, B, and C," and you weren't doing any of them, the carrier is going to say, well, you warranted on this application 3 months ago that you were doing all these things and you're not. And so, sorry, claim denied,
yeah.
which is a huge thing. I mean, we just went through a whole issue with a client who had a social engineering claim. And for those that don't know what that is, social engineering or cyber crime, it's been called a bunch of different things over the years, is when essentially you voluntarily give up money. So if someone convinces you to give up money. So, the most common type of claim is, somebody calls and says, hey, someone sends you wire instructions and somehow they get tampered with, or if someone calls you,
Yeah.
hey, can you change our wire instructions and this is our new account in bank, and you just change them and move on, or more than likely they email you. Well,
Right.
if somebody emails you or someone says, hey, or calls you and to change them, the proper protocol is to pick up the phone and call that person and verbally confirm them, and
Hmm.
not calling the number that's on the email because that could have been tampered with. Going back to an old email or the contact information you have for that person or that organization and calling them and confirming them. And if you don't do that and you warrant that you verbally confirm all wire instructions and you send $100,000 to someone that you shouldn't have sent it, you're not going to have coverage.
Yeah.
that is really the most common type of claim these days, and it falls under cyber policy. And it just goes back to if you're warranting that you're doing a certain thing and you're not, and you have a claim related to that issue, the carrier is going to say, "Sorry, can't help you."
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I I had a client that we were actually talking about just the low-hanging fruit, right? And multi-factor authentication is one of those low-hanging fruits in my mind. And I was like, so what's the resistance to implementing this? And the reason was like, well, we just don't like it. And I was like, okay, but you do understand that if you don't have this, you're not going to be able to qualify for insurance, right? And it was just like this, the reasons, like, well, some of our partners don't like the hassle, right? And I was just like, at some point, you've got to sort of put your foot down as an organization and say, we are a cyber first organization, and we're going to think about security. And here's what we're going to do, right?
I mean, it's like saying, you know what, we don't really want to put locks on the doors because every time we get to the door, we have to take the key out of our pocket or the key fob or put a code in. I mean, it's literally the same thing. We don't, it's so annoying. Every single day we have to unlock the car door, right? So we're just not going to lock it. And then you're surprised when your car gets stolen. I mean, it's almost the exact same thing, right?
Absolutely. In fact, I could literally do a podcast episode on just all the different like excuses that I get. I mean, I should probably do like a outtake
Yeah, I mean,
podcast
look,
on that.
I get it. I get it. We use multi-factor authentication. It is annoying. And if I add it up all the time in aggregate that I'm sitting there with my phone, putting in hitting the button, yeah, every day it's, whatever, 20 seconds. Over the week, it's a couple of minutes. Over the year, we're spending hours doing multi-factor authentication. But it's no different than locking the door. I
Yeah.
do that same excuse. We probably could do, maybe we'll do another podcast on all the excuses, but one of the big ones also is protecting data in transit, right? So like a lot of our clients have dates of birth, social security numbers, credit cards, and they're just emailing them. And you cannot email that stuff anymore. And so even my own clients, like, we collect that sort of information. And so I tell them, all right, we need to take a credit card. Don't email it to me. Call me with it. And in response to that email is their credit card information. And so then I'm just, it's like, and we take so much care to protect that information, and they're just sending it, or they're sending a copy of their driver's license, like social security numbers. And, they just, people are so trained to email stuff. And I say, look, if you want to send it to me, you don't want to pick up the phone, text it to me at least. Text me your
Yes.
social security number,
Yes.
or, it's like,
Absolutely.
so it's a challenge. And a lot of people just, they don't, a lot of people are not educated enough. And that's why it's great that we do podcasts and talks like this, because people need to understand that this is pervasive. It is happening everywhere, every single day. Every day, there are more and more attacks. And the more education people can get around it, the better.
Absolutely. My two favorite are like the one where I get the email with the password in it, right? And I'm like, don't send these two
What's the
together.
point of doing that, right? I mean, it's like it's crazy, but it's like
Um,
the same deal. People are like, oh, I gotta unencrypt this, and I'm like, yeah, you got to do it. Until not that long ago, I would say maybe a year ago, we were sending. We work with a lot of insurance carriers, insurance wholesalers, and we would send information to them that had our clients' data that was, sensitive data, and we sent
yeah.
it in via encrypted email, and they would have to set up a login and a password, and the carriers would respond to, oh, we can't do this every single time. I'm like, well, then I can't send you any information. You know,
Yeah.
it seems like unbelievably not that long ago, probably really in the last year, like I said, they've really started to come around and realize, well, this is the only way we're going to be able to work with Gregg and integrated coverage. And so, but there's a lot of other brokers out there that are still, doing the same thing that the general public is doing, and it doesn't work in the long run.
Yeah, and in fact, if you do have vendors or brokers or anybody that is willing to just accept information like that, you should question their security practices
Yeah,
and take a pause before you start sending them information because you certainly don't want to, engage with organizations that aren't willing to put security first.
yeah,
Just
I
especially in
agree.
this day and age, right?
Yeah, yeah,
One of the interesting things about cybersecurity and just trying to educate people about it is that we talked about the reactive versus proactive approach to it, and people just don't want to be proactive, right? And I often feel like a car salesman, when I'm talking about insurance, sorry, when I'm talking about cybersecurity, because it's like I'm really trying to tell you that these things are going to happen, but there's this like disbelief of, oh, this is not going to happen, right? And I think anyone I speak to, whether it's somebody in insurance or in technology or wherever, it's just this like cloud, right? That's just sort of following cybersecurity professionals because people just don't believe.
yeah. Until
And
that happens
and
to them, yeah.
yeah, exactly, right? And it's almost like
One of the
there's
big
this,
problems with it, there, to your point, is that a lot of times when companies in particular have a data breach or cyber event, it's not the kind of things that are, they're not yelling it from the rooftop, hey, all your
yeah,
data's compromised, right? And so,
yeah,
you might have a good friend that owns a business or a client or a colleague or whatever, a friendly competitor, and they're not talking about it because they don't want people to know about it.
yeah,
Everyone had to wear, a sign on their head that said, "Hey, I had a cyber attack in the last 3 years." You'd walk around and see a lot of people with a sign on their head, right? But
absolutely.
yeah, but
Yeah,
people don't talk about it, and so it's like this. Oh, well, I never hear about that. Well, the
yeah,
reality is it happens all the time. But
yeah.
really, the ones that you hear about are the big ones, right? The
Targets of the world,
yeah, the
right?
Targets and the Home Depots, and every other day I'm getting something in the mail that, sorry, your personal information has been compromised, right? I mean,
Yeah,
literally, I get many of those every year, and it's crazy. And at this point, I'm desensitized by it because what are you gonna
exactly. Well, it's almost like, in the pandemic when people got mask fatigue. I feel like people have cybersecurity fatigue.
do? Yeah,
And, there's just like,
personality.
well, it's okay. Everybody has my information anyway, is
Yep.
what I hear. Okay, let's talk about some trends. What are you seeing in the market when it comes to cyber insurance and, how's it evolving?
Yeah, I mean the cool thing about cyber insurance, and usually cool and insurance don't go together, but and it's one of the reasons that I have been so entrenched in cyber for many years now, is that it is still evolving and has been evolving for as long as it's been around. So I started helping my clients with cyber insurance, probably about 15 years ago when I first got into the business, and or more than that, now, but and nobody was talking about it. And it has evolved significantly over the years. The types of coverage, the limits that are provided, what triggers claims, the policy forms. I mean, it's just, it's constantly changing. Whereas if you look at a general liability policy, like a standard form, that form has
Hmm.
been the same for, forever,
Right.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
So while the super market has matured significantly over the years, called the last 15 years, it is still changing because really the bad actors are consistently changing the way that they attack and what they do, and then the carriers need to adapt to that. And so it is consistently changing. So um, which brings up actually a really good point. Oftentimes we'll come in and we're brought in really to look at cyber, although we work with commercial clients on all different types of insurance. And they'll have a client or a prospect will have insurance in place, a cyber policy for 5, 6, 7 years, and it will
Mhm.
have renewed every single year. But unless the broker goes to the insurance carrier and says, "Hey, I know that you've been insuring this for 7 years and renewing it with a modest increase each year, but you have a new, like, this is the addition of the policy that you have this on is 5 years old. Let's put this on the new
Yeah.
form." And all you have to do is ask, and there might be a slight change in premium or whatever, but now you have the upgraded policy, and so you get the benefit of having the coverage and the modules that actually respond to the types of claims that we're seeing today.
Yeah, that's huge because I think even from a cybersecurity perspective, like as a VCSO, People often ask, well, why do I need to engage you, on a monthly basis, right? And what I try to explain is that, these cyber criminals, like the things are changing constantly. Cybersecurity is changing constantly, and you really need somebody that's helping you guide, that journey, if you will, of cyber insurance and just how cybersecurity is evolving. So I'm glad to hear that insurance is evolving too, right? Like with it, that it's not just staying stagnant while the bad actors are continuing to change their ways.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's definitely continued to evolve, and usually there's a few carriers that sort of lead the way, and then their carriers respond, and will
Yeah.
their policies as well.
So speaking of policies, how do you actually choose the right policy? To avoid like, oh, this mistake that well, I thought I was getting this,
Yeah,
but you only find out that you weren't when an incident can potentially occur.
yeah. I mean, like I said, a lot of the policy forms are not standard, but a lot of the carriers, in terms of what they're trying to provide coverage for and how they're providing coverage, has somewhat, we've sort of come to a mean, they mostly provide similar coverage. I would, but they call different types of coverage different things, which can make it confusing. Um, one of the big things is that a lot of the insurance carriers will sublimit certain types of insurance, right? So, like, let's say you have a $2 million cyber insurance policy. A lot of carriers will sublimit, meaning they'll say, okay, you have $2 million of coverage here for the policy, but we're only going to give you $250,000 of social engineering coverage. And so that's one of the things that you really need to be careful about, because typically when carriers are sublimiting coverage, it's because they think there's a high chance of you having a claim. um,
Gotcha. Gotcha.
so they'll sublimit because they're trying to reduce their exposure. So, like, we could go to one carrier and you could have a $2 million policy and they'll sublimit social engineering to $250,000, or we could get it from another carrier and they'll sublimit it to 1 million, or give the full policy limits, which is becoming more and more rare. So it's really just kind of looking at the policies, understanding what's sublimited, what's not, where the exclusions are, and it's really a case by case basis, because the carrier that might be great for a medical practice is going to look very different than a restaurant, right?
Yeah.
There's different
Yeah.
exposures and different types of claims that are more prevalent, and you want to make sure you have the coverage in the right places. And so, that's typically our job as insurance brokers, to help our clients understand which options are the best.
Yeah, you know what would be an interesting episode that just kind of came to my mind as you were explaining this is to actually go through a policy and walk through what the different parts of the policy of a cyber insurance policy are. So that
Yeah.
might be something we have to do at some point together.
Yeah, we can do that. If you want to put everybody to sleep, we can certainly do that.
We've got to make it cool, right?
Yeah, no, it is important, and it kind of scares me sometimes when I propose my policies to a client or a prospect, and there's 10 different policy forms within
Hmm.
providing coverage in all different spaces, and they just like, okay, we're good, and they don't ask any questions about what's covered here, what's not covered.
Right,
The
right.
best question any consumer can ask in the insurance space is always, "Oh, what's not covered?" I don't tend to like it as the insurance broker, but it's a great question.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, no, that's a great tip.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a very interesting conversation, and I think that what I've learned from here is that we need to have a couple more episodes together.
Happy to do it. Yeah.
What I'd like to do is just leave our listeners with some lessons learned or some key takeaways, really. And the first one that I think is key, and please chime in, Greg, is to build a strong cybersecurity foundation, right? Have the basic protections in place, do a risk assessment, understand what your risk posture is, find the right partner, right? Find the right partner to help you with your cybersecurity, also with your cyber insurance. Make sure that you've got the right people in place to help you find and secure your organization. And then, be proactive about risk management, right? I think cyber insurance is really just one piece of the puzzle. But when you pair that with strong cybersecurity practices, I think you build a really good risk management strategy for your organization. But yeah, anything else that you'd like to add to that, Greg?
No, I think that's great advice, right? I mean, should really be the last resort. You never want to file an insurance claim, and doing the right things and preventing those claims is the most important thing, right?
Yeah,
You know, you lock the doors in your car and your building in your house so people don't get in. Well, lock up your data, have multi-factor authentication, right? If you own a building, you shovel outside when it snows and you get rid of the ice so people don't slip and fall, so you don't have a general liability claim. Well, don't just send emails with data, sensitive data, and not protect it. And it's the same thing. So protecting yourself is in your business is first and foremost. And then obviously getting cyber insurance in place that is appropriate for your business.
right. Completely agree. Well, thank you so much, Greg. I really appreciate that you took the time to join us today and help us understand cyber insurance a little bit better. Why don't you tell our listeners where they can find you if they wanted to get in touch with you, learn a little bit more about what you do?
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. It was fun. And if anyone wants to get in touch with me or has any questions, the name of the company is Integrated Coverage Group. You can go to our website, which is integratedcoverage.com. And our phone number is 516-209-4933.
And we will link all of this information in the show notes. I want to also remind folks that if you're looking for a VCSO or to have a risk assessment done on your organization, you can contact Minerva at let's talk at minervaconsultinginc.com. You can also visit our website at minervaconsultinginc.com. And before I sign off here, I'd like to ask our listeners to take 3 quick next steps. Number 1, subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss a new episode. Leave a rating and please add a comment. Greg, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And thank you all for listening.